welcome to the newsroom on NewsX World. I'm Kriti Mehta. Now on this show, we are going to bring you a roundup of all the top news stories that took place across the world, from the Russia-Ukraine talks in Geneva to the US-Iran talks mediated by Oman to the India AI Impact Summit. We're going to bring you the latest on all these stories and more. But to begin with, let's focus on the Russia-Ukraine talks. Talks between the two countries, with the US as a third-party negotiator, concluded in Geneva, with Ukrainian President Zelensky saying the negotiations were not easy. While both sides described discussions as difficult, they agreed to hold another round of talks. The latest US-mediated negotiations between Zelensky's team and representatives of Vladimir Putin concluded in Geneva with no major breakthrough, as Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine approaches its fourth anniversary next week. The Switzerland meeting marked the third round of direct talks organized by the US this year, following earlier discussions in Abu Dhabi that officials had described as constructive but inconclusive. Expectations for significant progress in Geneva were also low. But a key statement was that of Ukrainian President Zelensky, who said negotiations were not easy after the talks ended. Speaking briefly by phone from Kyiv with his negotiating team, he accused Moscow of stalling while continuing its military campaign. Zelensky said Russia's approach was trying to drag out negotiations. Despite deep political divisions, Zelensky said that there had been some movement on military-related discussions, particularly around the mechanisms and the mechanics of a potential ceasefire. As far as Russian side is concerned, delegation head Vladimir Medinsky described the talks as also difficult, but said they were businesslike. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov struck a cautious tone, saying it was too early to assess outcomes. He added that Putin had been receiving updates on the progress in Geneva. Both sides have confirmed that another round of talks is planned. The US was there to act as a mediator for the ceasefire. US President Donald Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff said Washington's diplomatic effort had brought about meaningful progress, though he offered no particular specifics. Any ceasefire involving or monitoring mechanism involving the US will mark a significant role for Washington in enforcing potential agreements on the ground. But even as talks unfolded, fighting persisted across the 1,250-kilometer front line. Hours after the first day of negotiations, Russian drone strikes had reportedly killed a woman and injured two children, a 6-year-old girl and an 18-month-old toddler, in the southern city of Zaporizhia. Let's go across to my colleague Marisha Barve, who's joining us to get us the latest. Marisha, another round of discussions has concluded tri-party talks as far as the negotiation for the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned. Another round has been planned. But what do we know about the outcomes of this round of talks?
Yes, well, Kriti, Geneva, Switzerland is gaining immense traction at this point because it is hosting rather one of the most high-leveled, high-profile and high-stake talks. This includes the trilateral between the US, Ukraine and Russia. The fact that the third round of peace talks have ended, and yet there has been no peace negotiation that has been struck is in fact alarming, because time and again the US has mediated for peace talks between Russia and Ukraine, and up until now we've still not seen a probable outcome that has come about with regards to peace. In fact, both the nations, that is Russia and Ukraine, have still not been able to come to a middle point when it comes to territorial concessions and security guarantees. And the result of all of this is in fact creating a huge vacuum when it comes to humanitarian aid and towards the crisis on the end of both Russia and Ukraine. But when it comes to the trilateral and the second day of talks, which is today, which were held earlier today, they have ended rather abruptly, according to reports that have come out of Geneva. Let's talk about a few key points with regards to the three delegations and the peace talks. Now, Ukraine's President Zelensky described the talks as I quote, difficult, and accused Russia of stalling progress. Now, Russian negotiator Vladimir Medensky has further called the talks businesslike but acknowledged they were difficult. Both sides agreed on a technical mechanism to monitor a future ceasefire with the US involvement. A few other developments that have come about is the fact that a potential prisoner swap was hinted at by Zelensky following the talks. Both sides confirmed that future negotiations would be scheduled, though no date or location was set. A few major striking points that are noteworthy come about with regards to territory, where Russia demands once again full control of the eastern Donbas region, including areas it doesn't currently occupy. Ukraine has before and again refuses to cede any territory. When it comes to security guarantees, Ukraine seeks long international security guarantees, but Russia insists the security guarantees, but Russia insists that any such guarantees must exclude Western troops or on Ukrainian soil. And when it comes to the pressure and the mediation of the US, the talks were mediated by Trump's administration with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, who are the special envoys. President Trump has publicly pressured Ukraine to make concessions, with Zelensky criticized, which Zelensky further criticized as unfair. Now, the challenges in all of these talks include the fact that despite some progress on technical issues, the core political differences between both the sides, especially over territory and security, remain unresolved. Now, the fact that the third round of talks has concluded on day 2 in Geneva, only time will tell if Russia and Ukraine can finally come to a peace agreement when it comes to the 4 years of war that has waged between both the nations. So yes, Kriti, this is the latest we know of day 2 of the talks, which have rather concluded to be abrupt.
Thanks very much for joining us and for sharing those inputs with our viewers. And with that, we are now going to move on. Viewers, from Russia, Ukraine, let's now shift our focus to US-Iran negotiations that are being held and mediated by Oman. Iran is saying that negotiations were made and some progress was likely seen in this round of talks. But certain sticking points continue to remain. Iran has said that it has reached an understanding with the US on the guiding principles to resolve the long-standing dispute over Tehran's nuclear program. However, there was still work needed to be done. The second round of talks between the two countries in Geneva was initiated by Oman, which also hosted the first round in Muscat earlier this month. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi told Iranian media that the talks were constructive, highlighting that both sides agreed to work further on draft text for a potential agreement. Ultimately, we were able to reach broad agreement on a set of guiding principles, based on which we will move forward and begin working on the text of a potential agreement. That was the statement of Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi to state media. As far as the US goes, US Vice President JD Vance has said that Iranians are yet to acknowledge and work through President Trump's red lines. In some way it went well. They agreed to meet afterwards, is what JD Vance, the US Vice President, has told media. He also said, but in other ways it was very clear that the President has set some red lines that the Iranians are not yet willing to actually acknowledge and work through. there are a number of things that make it clear that they are interested in acquiring nuclear weapons. Well, that's what JD Vance is saying, and he's adding the President of the United States is very much trying to find a solution here, whether it's through diplomatic options or through another option. That means the Iranians cannot have the nuclear weapon. Well, that's the key demand as far as United States goes. Iran, meanwhile, of course, temporarily closed the Strait of Hormuz for live fire drills as it held the second round of negotiations and talks with Washington. Iranian media had announced the closure of the key international waterway, following which it fired live missiles toward the Strait of Hormuz. The projectiles, according to news agencies, hit the targets in the Strait of Hormuz. But some reports are still saying that a joint war by US, Israel on Iran is likely, it is possible soon, and compared to the Israeli-led 12-day war last June, the sources are now pointing out that this one would probably be a joint US-Israel assault that is considerably going to be larger in scope and more existential for the regime. Trump wants a settlement, but JD Vance has made it clear that he has the power to decide the diplomacy has reached its natural end. Now, Trump's major war with Tehran that's likely is, as per reports only, a US military operation in Iran would probably be a large and weeks-long campaign that would resemble a full-fledged war more than the precise operation that was seen in Venezuela. But as experts say, Iran is no Venezuela. If a US and Israel combined strike happens, Iran is definitely most likely to strike back. That's the opinion coming in from analysts and experts. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has also presented a comprehensive report to the Iranian cabinet in a meeting that was chaired by the president of the country on Wednesday morning. Earlier today, the report entailed details of the course of recent negotiations with the US. He went into detail about the frameworks being discussed, the many aspects of the discussions, and the future prospects. And following the end of the negotiations at the Omani embassy in Geneva, Araghchi made remarks stating that the discussions were more fruitful than the previous round and were held in a serious setting. Let's in fact go back to my colleague Marisha Barve, who's there with us to get us more on this. Marisha, again, second round of talks also between US and Iran, but reports are still coming up that are seeing now not just a US strike, but a combined Israeli and US strike is imminent. It's possible very soon. What is it that you're picking up from the newsroom?
Yes, well, Kriti, let's talk about the background of it first. Let's start from there. Once again, Geneva hosts these talks between Iran and the US, this time with the second round of talks which have come to an end today and we will be tracking. But as of now, the main objective of these talks is that USA in fact is negotiating to Iran when it comes to obtaining nuclear weapons, and they want to prevent Iran from obtaining these nuclear weapons to avoid a regional arms race, especially with Saudi Arabia. Now, there has been a 2-week deadline that has been set. This is coming after the result of the talks, where US has given Iran 2 weeks to submit detailed proposals to address concerns over uranium enrichment and verification. When it comes to the other option and strategic pressure, Vance, who is JD Vance, who is US's Vice President, has come about and said that Vance emphasized that while President Trump prefers diplomacy, military actions remain an option if talks fail. Recent US strikes in June 2025 were cited as setting back Iran's nuclear program significantly, sending a message of American resolve. Now, JD Vance clarified that the US is not seeking to overthrow the Iranian government, and such a decision is for the Iranian people to make. But this, of course, is causing an impact over economy and the region, where global energy markets are shifting, where oil prices rose over 2% following Vance's comments about potential for military action. When it comes to US crude oil, 1 barrel of oil further costs around $63.89 US dollars. When it comes to Iran's position, Iran's denial of nuclear weapon ambitions is something that has been tracked, where Iranian President Pezeshkian stated that Iran is not seeking nuclear weapons, emphasizing the program's peaceful use when it comes to medical, industrial and agricultural facilities. He in fact reiterated that nuclear weapons are forbidden under religious decree by Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei. Now, Iran is open to any verification by the IAEA, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency, to prove its program is in fact peaceful. Now, the diplomatic context of all of this is coming with Pezeshkian's remarks coincide with ongoing US-Iran negotiations, where Iran has rejected, as I quote, excessive demands and insists that its right to peaceful nuclear technology remains. And when it comes to the tensions and the heightened regional conflict, the talk follow a brief war in June of 2025 involving US strikes. So yes, Kriti, this is what we know.
Manisha, thanks very much for joining me and for sharing that. In fact, viewers, we're now cutting across to some more breaking news details that are coming in. Now, according to reports, the US may be moving closer to military action against Iran. That's the breaking news update that we were just talking about, and let's go full frame on that. The US may be moving closer to military action against Iran, which say any operation would be massive, weeks-long campaign rather than a limited strike. An advisor of the US President Donald Trump has recently reported that there is a 90% chance of what is being described as kinetic action within the next few weeks, as the president has been growing increasingly frustrated over the Iran-US nuclear talks, which have seen very little progress. The reports also suggest that any strike could be a joint US-Israel operation broader than the 12-day strike on Iran that occurred in June last year, and that this operation could also be potentially threatening to Iran's leadership. It also warns that such a war could have major consequences for President Donald Trump's remaining time in office. Despite the high stakes, there has been little public discussion in the US Congress. Remember, viewers, this is coming after Trump reportedly nearly authorized strikes in January this year, following a deadly crackdown on protesters in Iran and rising tension over Tehran's nuclear program. While no strikes were carried out at the time, the Trump administration adopted a two-pronged strategy, which was building up military pressure while continuing nuclear talks. All right, viewers, let's now move on and cover the latest as far as the India AI Impact Summit 2026 is concerned. New Delhi is hosting this ginormous summit in Bharat Mandapam, and today Prime Minister Narendra Modi has welcomed leaders from across the world. Leaders from several nations have joined this India AI Impact Summit. In fact, let's bring you more details as far as the day 3 of the summit is concerned. We saw the attendance of several nations, including France, Kenya, Estonia, and more. The summit, of course, being held at Bharat Mandapam, is one of a kind that's being held in the global south. Let's in fact go back to my colleague Marisha, who's there to get us the latest as far as the big statements that have come out and the big outcomes from the third day of the summit.
Yes, well, Kriti, it in fact is a monumentous moment for India, which is hosting the AI Impact Summit of 2026. The reason why this is on such a global scale and why this matters so much is because this is the first such AI summit that is happening and has been hosted in the global south. And this has invited many heads of state, many tech giants, many industry experts who have come and witnessed and graced the event, and many investments have been made. Let's take a look at a few details that have come about with the third day of the summit here in New Delhi. Big tech investments were seen with Microsoft, which will be investing around $50 billion in AI infrastructure across the global south by 2030, with around $17 billion specifically for India. Now, Google CEO Sundar Pichai announced the India-America Connect initiative, a new subsea cable route to improve AI connectivity between the US and India. And you see NVIDIA has partnered with L&T Yota and the NPCI to build AI factories and sovereign AI compute clusters in India. In fact, there has been a Guinness World Record that has been set. The summit is set a Guinness World Record for the highest number of pledges taken within 24 hours for the responsible use of AI. Now, a lot of global leaders arrived in New Delhi, including Sundar Pichai, Rishi Sunak, and leaders from Spain, Sweden, and Mauritius arrived in New Delhi for the summit. When it comes to the technological sovereignty, PM Modi outlined a roadmap for sovereign AI, stressing the importance of India's leading in AI creation rather than just being a mere consumer. Now, in the midst of all of this, you see there has been a VIP movement that has taken place where the expo will be closed to the public on Thursday, which is 19th February, for VIP security reasons, including the visit of French President Emmanuel Macron. Now, there has been a lot of discussions and a lot of showcases of a lot of advanced technology. One such was a controversy which came about with regards to the RoboDog controversy. A Chinese-made robotic dog named Orion was showcased by the Galgotius University at the expo, sparking a backlash. The Ministry of Electronics and IT ordered the removal of the exhibit to maintain the authenticity of the event. So this is what has come about with regards to key highlights when it comes to the India AI Impact Summit of 2026, Kriti. We still have a few more days to go. We are tracking it closely on NewsX World. So do stay tuned for further updates that we will be covering in the coming few days.
Marisha, once again, thanks very much for joining us and filling in our viewers with those latest details. And for that, viewers, we're now going to move on. Let's now tell you about US and its posture on climate change is concerned. Once again, US Energy Secretary has made a statement much in tune with his President Donald Trump on climate talks and treaties. Now, US Energy Secretary Chris Wright has said that climate cult hurts Europe's economy. Those are the words from the US Energy Secretary. He said a climate cult has weighed on Europe's economy, adding that the US has shown its allies tough love because it wants them to become stronger. Wright is attending the ministerial meetings at the Paris-based International Energy Agency this week. months after US-European ties were rattled over Trump's bid to acquire Greenland. In an interview with the AFP, Wright has said that Europe can count on the US as a reliable partner despite the tension over the Danish autonomous territory. He also defended Trump's decision last week to repeal the climate agreements and the legal basis for US climate rules, downplaying concerns about rising carbon emissions. To quote a statement, Wright said that that's been sort of a side effect of the modern world. The real impact is the world's a little bit warmer, a little bit greener, a little bit wetter, and all that policies, noise in Europe, in the US and all that don't even move the needle on that. The European Union's climate monitor, however, says the last 3 years have been the hottest globally on record, driven by rising greenhouse gas emissions that are causing global warming. He also said that climate cult has driven up energy prices in Europe. While the continent produces less of it, it has reduced economic opportunities for European and European Union. EU Energy Commissioner Dan Jorgensen has in fact said last month that there were increasing worries over Europe becoming too dependent on United States for liquefied natural gas following the Greenland spat. Europe has vowed to buy huge amounts of fossil fuels from the US as part of a trade deal to end a tariff row last year. Jorgensen has told media that geopolitical turmoil in the wake of the crisis in Greenland has been a wake-up call. And he also said that the US would not use LNG as political leverage. Remember viewers, the 31-member IEA, it was founded in 1974 to help coordinate collective responses to major disruptions of supplies in the wake of the 1973 oil crisis. Scientists say the world must reach net zero emissions by 2050 if it is to reach the Paris Agreement's goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. And viewers, with that, we wrap up this edition of the newsroom at NewsX World. Stay tuned as we continue to bring you national, international news and updates.